and this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
February is Heart Month. Every year for the month of February, to show our appreciation to Extendivite's faithful customers, we have a sale. If you would like to try Extendivite, now is the time to get a few months ahead and really give Extendivite the time to show you how it works. Most of Extendivite's long-term customers wait for this sale to stock up. People and doctors tell us about the unbelievable improvements that they have experienced in their overall health, not just the heart. Extendivite wants you to experience the power of these herbs. Get a 4-month supply for only $115 for either the capsules or tincture. Please take advantage of this once-per-year sale and get healthy for life. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or find us on Amazon.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. Our producer is Thomas Becker, and our guest today is Kenneth Hopkins. He has been researching UFOs in the military and the industrial complex, which began in 2004. In the mid-70s, he would experience what was referred to as blackouts with female friends. For many years, he ignored these blackouts, and in early 2000, began experiencing flashbacks. For most of his life, he had been under some kind of monitoring. There were phone taps, vehicle surveillance in his home, and car break-ins. And so he's been doing photography, and he's been capturing hard proof of abductions and what abductees may be experiencing at night. And he uses security cameras as a means of proof, and he's going to discuss the 3 security camera system that we use on abductees and contactees. But back to his story, this led him to ask many questions and begin to work with hypnotists to get a better understanding of what was going on. So for close to 5 years, they were unable to get clarity through hypnosis. The suggestions of abductions seemed absurd to him. Eventually, they were able to get some clarity in a 12-hour missing time period. And this incident, this is like what we call the critical incident, and it opens up the Russian dolls affecting people. And it involves a young woman, the Grays, and a cerebrum implant. And this opened his door for interviewing MK Ultra victims and he wrote a book with the aid of a former professor. So he's going to talk about his work and his pictures, and he has them on aquarianradio.com. And Dr. Lesson, are you there? Sound check in.
Yes, I am here.
Good.
Ken, I'm gonna really ask you about. Janet rapped about you talking about abductions. A lot of the people we work with call themselves witnesses or ambassadors or contactees or experiencers, and they don't feel like they were that they weren't. They were glad to do it in some cases, and so I'm really curious what you actually caught on film. Is it what variety, what percentage is abduction, what is something else?
Yeah, well, mainly what I was working with was what was going on in people's homes at night, and it was kind of by accident that we set up the cameras. But the reason I continue, I like to use all those three terms: abductee, contactee, and experiencer. But for many of us, we don't have the choice when they take us at night. They take us when they're ready for us. When we're teleported to places that are expecting us. And so we really don't have any, really haven't agreed or been aware that we are going to be taken on any particular night. So that's kind of why I continue with abductee.
Let me just ask about a distinction, because several of the people we've worked with said it's the difference between whether it's a MyLabs, GIs pushing us around, or whether it's someone else that is particularly rough is the MyLabs. And so I just wonder if you have any reflection on that too.
Yeah, one of my acquaintances experienced the MyLab, and she was poisoned, lost consciousness. Men took her out of her house. They took her to an underground facility, and she described some procedures they did to her, and it was very, definitely very physical. What we have going on is a very highly advanced technology, and this is what I was photographing, and it was identified to me as plasma teleportation. And unfortunately, there's a very strong electromagnetic disruption that has destroyed cameras, burst batteries in those cameras, and also makes the pictures look very rough. And you can see how the EMFs play in the static, and so it's made some clarity difficult. But we've been able to get the person, when the person disappears, they disappear clean. They may get out of their bed, disappear. They may disappear in their bed, under their sheets, and when they return, they come in a collage of colors, and then eventually those very bright colors take a solid form. And so that they're basically going from energy back to matter, from matter back to energy. And whatever is controlling this technology, we have no idea. We have no understanding. And I'm speaking for a particular group that I've been involved with. I've spoken with many different experiencers with many different ET groups. But our particular experiences seem to be with this teleportation at night. And then some of us believe we're teleported to other places in the country, other places in the world. So
where are some of the places that you're being teleported? Have you been able to identify any of the places that you're being teleported to?
I had a telephone call from Illinois, from a family that's father had died, and they said I was listed as their father's friend. And I was a little confused, and I asked where they're calling from. They told me they were calling from Illinois, and I said, they gave me their father's name. I didn't know their father's name, and then they had called me, and I said, you must be calling the wrong person. They said, no, Kenneth Hopkins, you are Kenneth Hopkins? And I said, yes. They had my correct telephone number, and then the guy went on. He was the son of the father that had died, and he went on to say how I had visited his family on several occasions. I had some recollection of a family that I had seen a couple times, and the daughter leaving for some place. I thought they were dreams. The daughter had left for Russia. Then I had another person confirmed my visit when I was working third shift. She confirmed my visit in Lynn, Mass. And my visit caused a lot of problems with at the timing of my visit, her sister was shot. Her sister had been involved with me 30-something years ago with a lot of the missing time episodes. And I was coming to try to get some answers to try to meet up with the sister when I was in Lynn, Mass, and it was my second visit that the sister was shot.
How was she shot?
She was shot by her husband in the head, and she went into protective custody. She survived the shooting, and she went into protective custody. And I believe she's somewhere in Connecticut. I was trying to find a way to meet up with her, and the sister was also in hiding, and they were the daughters of a naval intelligence admiral, and I really don't have much understanding of what had gone on. Prior to my visit with him, he had been tortured. We were told, the family had been told he was dead. And then one of the daughters found him many years later, and there was a lot of surveillance going on around that family. And I was living with that family off and on for a short time in '76. But it gets complicated, and
does it go two ways, Ken? When you're missing, you're saying what happens when you get wherever you get. What happens to people that were in contact with you from the place where you were taken?
Okay. From the you're talking about the place I go to?
No, where you go from. You were in a bed or something at night,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
In a house.
Yeah. And what we found with a number of people, my wife was in the bed with me during these, but she remained undisturbed, which seemed to be a common thing with these occurrences. So the cameras showed me getting up. Initially, we set the cameras up because my son, who's also had experiences with the Greys, came into my room to shut the door, and he saw a Grey standing by the head of the bed.
Oh.
So he slammed the door, and then the Grey reappeared in an adjoining room, and the Grey was one he was familiar with. So after, and when the Grey realized he wasn't angry, then the Grey returned back to the room. I have very little memory, if any memory. I have some memory with the Greys, but most of what I've gotten on the Greys has been through hypnosis. The Greys seem to like to use an alternate personality in most of the interactions, especially the early interactions. and they used a particular personality that, when we accessed, explained to us what was happening through hypnosis. So when my son described where the gray was standing, I set the cameras up for that spot, see if we can get a picture of them again returning. And it was in that series of pictures that we discovered that I was leaving the room. I would get out of the bed, and I sent the pictures of the teleportation, a series of still shots showing what looks like an energy field, me forming, and then in one of the sequences that I sent, I actually returned and then left again. So you can see the plasma image in the pictures I sent, and those.
Was if you were to look at the colors of the sequences and the things in the plasma image, do the colors give you some kind of, or the pattern give you some kind of way to identify what the qualities of that membrane or whatever it is?
Well, what we found interesting in looking at the multiple pictures is they were the same. The multiple pictures of the plasma teleportation is that they were the same color combinations.
Wow.
And blues, greens, and bright light, and it would almost be like an oval shape. It would form into an oval shape. Do you have? I sent some of the pictures to you. Do you have access to them?
Yeah, they're on the website, aquarianradio.com.
Okay.
I'm finding up my show page back, so people that are listening can go to aquarianradio.com and pull up the pictures and look along with what you're going to talk about. So which ones do you want to talk about right now? If you want to go look at it, go ahead. Yeah.
The ones that show this mass of striped colors in the center.
Yeah. Looking at them.
Those and it was interesting because we couldn't use battery cameras because and we lost a lot of electronics. 5 television sets were blown in that room where these were occurring in a 10-year period. And radio was lost, but when we were using the Bushnell hunting cameras, which are used, they're put on trees, we can get up to a certain point of things, but then if there was a full teleportation, the batteries would explode. And so
wow.
we couldn't get the teleportation so then we tried to use an adapter, a plug-in adapter, and Bushnell Cam doesn't make an adapter, and and so you have to buy one and solder it together from Radio Shack, which no longer exists. So we tried some of that, but then what we did is we found we used a remote camera which was made by Swan, which Radio Shack used to sell. And that transmitted at 2.5 gigahertz. And that gave a very different image to the same things that the Bushnell camera recorded.
That means you can establish the range of disturbances and how intense it is close to the plasma and as you move away from it. That's fantastic. What did you find?
Well, a number of things we found was when this plasma configuration took place, it was kind of in a tornado pattern. And because we found reflections on opposite sides of things that weren't in view of where the light the teleportation was occurring. So we had to assume that there was a spiral circular motion to it. And in some of them you can see in the center, almost like the center of a tornado, it's highly concentrated mass. And it almost seems like the field, I don't know how the field is opened or generated, but the field develops in the room. And then I think the field finds the mass it's looking to teleport, and then that person disappears. And then what we also found, during the entire time the person was gone, the electromagnetic disruption obliterated everything in the room from the cameras. So all you saw was colors. Until the person returned, then you got the security camera showing the regular view of the room. So it gave us the impression that there was a two-way door going on. That when the person was teleported, the area they are teleported remained open to the gate.
Oh, wow. So it's, let me just get it. It's sudden. It's not gradual. It's a sudden disappearance.
It's pretty quick. It's within a second. Because we had the cameras set. We had them set at 1 second intervals, and so we're getting pictures every second. I'd say the person would disappear clean. There might be a light when the person disappeared. When the person returned, that was when the plasma configuration came. And then we also found that, and we filmed, and I call them interdimensionals. In my dialogue with, I can't remember her name now, but she's written quite a few books. It'll come to me. Linda Moe.
Lisha Johnson? Oh, Linda Moe. Oh, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. She told me to look at interdimensionals. And it was a whole direction she started me looking at, because at the time I first started looking at this, I was just dealing with the flashbacks and the hypnosis. And I had no recollections of what was going on at night, like most of us that were experiencing these that I have talked about. They thought they were in a dream. They thought it was a very for real dream. The cameras frightened my family quite a bit, and my wife tolerated them up to a point, and then eventually she didn't want the cameras anymore. What she saw on the cameras, she found very frightening. But most of the people felt these experiences that they were having were dreams, and they didn't realize they actually had left their room. And so then we set cameras up in 4 other houses. And these are with people that had showed up at one was with a woman that I had worked with in the psychic group, and she had described experiences with the Greys. And so we set a camera up in her place. Another woman, she had men approaching her, asking questions about me. She wasn't comfortable. She dropped out, but we had photographed the giant orb. Now, I believe I sent you a picture of the giant orb. It's about 5 feet in diameter.
I don't think I have that. 1 second. Let me look. I moved away. A giant orb?
Yeah, it's kind of
or maybe I'm not recognizing it.
Yeah. Well,
okay, it's like a big white White
Yeah.
light?
Yeah. That was picked up with the Bushnell cameras. And we got many orbs with the Bushnell hunting cams. And we found was in two of the houses that we had set cameras up, we found that there was an orb in a fixed location of the house. It seemed to come and go, but always in that same place. In my house, it was the laundry room. And then with the Bushnell cam, you would see the orb go over the person, and then the person would disappear in the orb, or the giant orb would engulf them, and they'd disappear. The cameras doing 2.5 gigahertz showed the electrical disruption, showed a whole different image than the Bushnell camera showed. So it seemed like one was good at picking up the electrical disruptions. And we also came across a microwave frequency. It was described going across the picture. And I sent you a couple of the pictures with what looks like a rope going through the center. Yeah,
they're up on the site.
Yeah, we had no idea. We don't really understand what and that was identified as a microwave frequency. We don't understand what that had. Some of the pictures it would show up in, some of the pictures it wouldn't show up in. We didn't have an explanation for what caused that to go across. At one point, we thought it might have been a monitoring frequency, or a way of monitoring. We came across several devices in this house that had been put in. One was in a radio, one was in a wall. When
they put devices in your house?
Yeah, this was, and we were using to locate the devices. The thing that we found did the best was the EMF meters located the listening devices. So we had one device removed, and I had a person take it to their house, and her father was going to evaluate it for us. They broke into their house and took it, and then and she was the one that was having the visitor. She had two men come to the door of her house asking her questions about me, and then they were also watching her from the driveway. We don't know who they were. She seemed to think they were military, because they seemed to have a military stance. So as she was seeing more of them, she wanted out of. She was the only one that had direct contact with them. She was also former Army intelligence. I don't know if that had something to do with it or not, but
might have.
But so and what I couldn't understand is she had invited me to dinner with her boyfriend, and the men approached her second or third time, and she mentioned the dinner invitation to me in private, and they seemed to know about the dinner invitation, which made no sense to me. How would they have known about the dinner invitation?
They're monitoring you.
Yeah, if they monitored her phone. But I hadn't discussed it with her on the phone. I had discussed it with her in the college. But yeah,
if you ever belong to an intelligence service, they think they own you forever.
Yeah, well, my initial we had in 76, when I was having these blackouts, 75, 76, 77, and I believe one of the blackouts was witnessed by when I was going to Northeastern University, and this is during a time I didn't know what was going on. I got a job with a Defense Department contractor. I didn't realize that they had me sign papers. I didn't realize they were connected to top secret security clearance. They're very vague about the papers. I should have read the papers. They told me I was getting a check, so I came to the facility to get my check, and in turn, all they had was papers for me to sign. And so I didn't realize that I had signed permission for a top secret security clearance. And I didn't even know that this facility was a top secret facility. So I was it was Sylvania, GT Sylvania was the one doing the contract, and they were teaching students from the Middle East electronics and computers. And many of the students had later defected to Canada because they didn't want to do what they're being asked to do and taught at that school. So that was a top secret facility, and I had been bringing friends to look at the facility. I was very impressed with it. It was Gothic. It had spider web and a spider on it in the spider web, and the whole facility was just very intriguing. So I'd show it to my friends, and on one of my friends I picked up and showed it to her. They detained us, and they detained us for like 40 minutes, and I couldn't understand why they were detaining us because they hadn't detained me when I was visiting with my other friends. So we left to go to a movie, and we thought we had gone to a movie, Blazing Saddles, and then 2 days later, when I returned to work, they started questioning me on the movie. And as they were questioning me on the movie, I knew nothing about the movie, which I thought was really strange. I couldn't understand why I knew nothing about a movie I had gone to. So what I assumed was both she and I were dealing with a fake memory.
Right.
And the men had followed us from the facility. That's why they detained us, and they had witnessed something. And both the men were agents with the Defense Department, and they questioned her as well as me on the same thing. After they questioned her, she wanted nothing further to do with me. And then one of the agents came up to me and said, "You better watch yourself. They're going to watch you wherever you go, whatever you do. They will not let you you will not get away with it." And I'm trying to think, what the hell is he talking about? I wrote the details very well in the diaries. So at that time in 76, I just dismissed it, and then they bring a woman into the facility, and then they start having me take her home at night. And as I later found out, she was working undercover for them. So what had found out in the regressions is that there was an abduction.
Wait, you were taking her home at night? What, you were taking her to your home, or you were just driving home?
What? Oh, try that again.
She's going to the person that you were taking home at night. You were taken to her home or to your home?
Oh, they were having me take her to her house. They started having me take. She was visiting the facility, and after that incident, after that guy had told me they were going to be watching me, you're not going to get away with this. She shows up at the institution or at the facility, the school, and then she starts regularly showing up, and then she's staying late, and then they're asking me to take her home. And so I started taking her. Home as they were asking me to, and then and she was the one that I started having a lot of blackouts with, probably more blackouts with her than anybody. But what I found out, we did the regressions on that night that we went to see the movie Blazing Saddles. And we basically had never, we often would park down dark dirt roads or down dirt roads for privacy. And apparently, according to the regression, we never left the point that we were at. We had stayed there and remained there. And that the abduction took place in the woods near where the car was. So what I'm assuming was what the people that followed us witnessed was that abduction. And then what they did after that is they brought in a woman to further observe me. And she had, I don't know if you're familiar with the MK Ultra Monarch projects.
Yeah, but you can tell us so the listeners can understand it from your perspective.
They were putting electronic pieces in these children's heads, and they'd put them in when they were very young, somewhere around 4, 5, or 6. In my book, I have a picture of a child with wires coming from the top of her head, which was a CIA release on the Monarch projects. When I was going under hypnosis, we were trying to find out what happened with the longest blackout period, which was about 12 hours. And we couldn't get anywhere for 4 years with different hypnotists. So I finally went with a MUFON hypnotist in New Hampshire that was recommended. And he was a little more aggressive about getting the memory than the other hypnotists had been. And what we got in the memory was we were in a ship with the Greys, and this young woman had a series of convulsions that were quite violent the previous day that led her to be hospitalized by ambulance. So in the regression, she was screaming for a long period of time, and the Greys seemed to be waiting for her to kind of give up. They for some reason were just letting her scream. And eventually, in exhaustion and fatigue, she gave up. And I was behind a wall that she was on the other side of. I couldn't hear her screams from. And then a door formed in the wall, and they brought me in, and she had been taken apart. And it made no sense to me. They had removed her skull section. They had removed the right side of the cerebrum. Wow. And then they pointed and they said, "Do you know what that is?" And I looked, and there was an electronic. It looked like a diode that seemed to go into her brainstem. That was up against the left side of the cerebrum. And I was somewhat horrified because I thought they had killed her, and I knew nothing about that. But obviously, that was what was causing the convulsions. So then, when I answered that I knew nothing about it, they led me out of the room, and then the next memory came up. They had us in another location. And I was glad to see that she was still alive. And then eventually we were back in the car. And the Greys, I don't have an understanding of how they do it. You're driving a vehicle, boom, you're gone. And then boom, you're back in the vehicle. And the only difference is it's hours later. So I don't have, I don't know how they do that. There was, when she had been disassembled, there was no bleeding, there was no blood. And so so after that regression, it made no sense to me at all, and I was ready to ditch all that I'd been working for to find out what was going on with hypnotic regressions. I looked up brain shunts, and eventually I started looking up on the experiments that were done with children in these cerebral implants, and apparently that was done to her as a child. I also found a connection with military intelligence and the MK Ultra, almost like they were fitted by the MK Ultra process to be in intelligence.
Okay.
Because the sister was aware of the MK Ultra. She talked about them as being an international group. She was aware of the MK Ultra and her family. Her father, as I mentioned, was an admiral of naval intelligence. So it was very interesting that and I found almost like a cult-like pattern with the MK Ultra and families. And I had interviewed a number of other MK Ultra, another woman in Colorado that had a cerebral implant, and talked to numerous people through an organization that was against government surveillance. It was an organization against surveillance, and they had put me in touch with a lot of MK Ultra people to interview and talk to. And then I also spoke with a surgeon that was in California that was involved in the removal of these devices. But my understanding was that these devices weren't removable because in the child's brain development, they became part of the brain.
Was that Roger Lear, Dr. Roger Lear?
No. I read a lot of his stuff, and we were taking pictures, and I was getting pictures of marks that were on people that returned, that had abductions or woke up with these marks on them. We found a lot of familiar, but Greer was doing a lot on the implants.
Yeah, this is Roger Lear.
Lear, yeah, Dr. Lear was doing a lot on the implants. And in his later stuff that I looked at, he was surprised at how many implants that he was finding were actually government-laid or government-implanted, and not connected to abductions.
Except that there's government abductions. Yeah. But, Sasha, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Not a question, but Elizabeth Anglin, who was companion abducted with this other kid. The kid just turned up suddenly dead with this, with what became apparent was a slip, that they just had made a mistake. They didn't mean to kill this child. And it sounds just exactly like the story. She tells her story. Her name's Elizabeth Anglin. But and so then all the principals, there was 5 children that were abducted together. So they were all protected and everything, and by the whole community.
Now, was this done by the Greys?
Yeah.
Oh, it was done by the Greys.
Yeah.
No, because I've come across, there was in the what there seemed to be, there was over a dozen missing time experiences with this young woman, and what the regressions were showing was the Greys were interested in the implant. We couldn't confirm. One of the things we looked into confirm, was whether they actually removed it. But we weren't able to get confirmation as to whether it was. But we definitely had numerous abductions where they were looking at it. But most of the times when people were abducted, they were separated from me when I and them were abducted. And they'd be in another room. And there was probably 7 different women involved in the series of abductions from 1975 to 1977. And some of them, of course, were abducted multiple times. So what I assumed they were doing is they were putting embryos in these women. And then after 5 weeks, that was my understanding, that after a period of the embryos being in the women, they'd be removed and then incubated, and the Greys would incubate them in these glass containers.
That would give them enough time to get the mitochondrial DNA from the human's uterus, the placenta, the human.
Yeah. Now the question I had, or I have, did they have the embryo completed and they just put the embryo in these women, or did they use parts from the women to combine with the embryo?
Barbara Lamb says basically the entire placenta is gone with too, in her cases.
Okay.
I think they do a wide variety of things. I'm an experiencer. I've been part of the program, and we've interviewed, dozens and dozens of people. Sometimes they create a mixture outside of the uterus, and it can be a combination of many different species, or just human and an alien, right? Greys. And then they will introduce that into the female to a certain point. It's like they need that primary incubation, and it's sometimes early on. For me, they never let me fully even miss a period, but I was well aware because I was documenting what was going on, and I was going through infertility. I was trying to get pregnant with my husband, and they never let me have it. So I would see when they just kept taking them. They're kind of mean, yeah. So
now did they do you a lot of times? A number of women
at one point, yeah.
A lot of the women felt they had exhausted their bodies by the amount of times they did these procedures, these embryo implants.
They sometimes do it your entire life. I mean, how many eggs does a woman produce? And then they clone it in addition. So at one point I was told that, I thought, I have a few kids, especially as the story started emerging, but they said, no, you have a whole city. I mean, they can just take your DNA, and if they like it or it's something that they're looking for, they can use it for, populating other planets, and the kids don't end up being here necessarily. They could be on board ships.
Yeah, that would be. But it seemed to be in a lot of these 45 minutes, under an hour, it seemed, or maybe around an hour, that they would take us. And I was always questioning whether they had the embryo already put together and then they just put it in the uterus of the woman. I've read a lot of transcribed tapes and regressions, and I've listened in on a couple where the woman explains what they're doing to her. So I was always assuming that the embryo was already prepared before it was put in. So I was always curious, did they use something from that woman, or was it already the embryo already prepared and all they did was implant it?
I think it's all the above. It just depends on what what department you're in and who you're working with. So it's not that limited. We're trying to limit it like, this is what they always do. No, they do all kinds of things. So if you're in the program,
So that they seemed, and it was interesting that the these 7 women almost seemed like they were random, that they took me with. Now there seems to be history in my family with my mother had numerous sightings, and which always one thing that came up a lot with some abductees is that they've seen the ships a lot. In that they're consciously aware of seeing the ships a lot.
Let me just I'm a little bit confused. Are you saying that you fertilized each of these women, and that was your job when you were up there?
No. If anything, I don't know. If anything, the only thing I did naively myself was go on dates in cars down dirt roads. That's all. That my purpose was just to have privacy, have a beer, talk. That was my purpose in all these periods that they took the women. It almost seemed like the women were random. Most of the women that were with me at that time were the ones they took.
Wow.
So I didn't. All I know is I was having a lot of blackouts when I was with these women, and I had no explanation. At 23, I had no way of knowing how to find out what was happening in these blackouts of hours to up to 12 hours and almost most of a whole day in and out. So but it seemed like I was definitely being utilized as a resource of getting the women to them.
Was this frightening to you? It would scare the heck out of you.
I didn't find out about it until 2004 and 2005. My son started talking about his experiences, and that started triggering flashbacks. And the flashbacks, of girls screaming, of mainly they were of the girls screaming, and strange auras or strange sensations. So then that was why in 2002, 2003, I started seeing hypnotists to see what the hell were these blackouts. The other thing that was interesting is the surveillance. People started dying around me, and so with the last 2 people that died, they just disappeared. Their bodies were never found. So then, following the disappearance of what I felt was a federal agent, I wasn't sure, men came to my apartment looking for me. I wasn't there, and I was told by the guy that had just disappeared that these men in suits are vicious, they're aggressive, you don't want to be around when they come around. So I assumed that these men in suits were the ones that may have played a role in his disappearance. So I ran into the Navy, thinking, oh, it's all over, and end up in Orlando, Florida, and so I thought these people were a threat to my life because of the people that died. And so then I ended up in the Navy to discover the surveillance, the mail interception, the phone call stuff. A white vehicle at that time was following me and my friends everywhere we went when we went off base. I confronted naval intelligence because I was going through another top security clearance for the nuclear program in the Navy. They told me it had nothing to do with them. They don't do that. They're going to look into it, but nobody ever gave me answers. I went to the FBI on these vehicles to see if it was the FBI. The FBI said it wasn't them, of course. They brought my car in. They scanned the car, but they didn't tell me much. So the mail interception was what really made me angry, and of course, I really didn't know who to blame it all on. So the surveillance basically continued until about 2 or 3 years ago.
We're coming up on a break. I just want to interject right here. Sorry, we're going to be getting cut off. We're going to be coming up on the break in about 30 seconds here. So this is very interesting. We're going to come back after a commercial break, and we're going to pick this up. So remember where we are. So you ran to the military. Just remember where you are. You ran to the military.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right.
The hope is that to escape these control, you ran right to the military. Gotcha.
Yeah, and the FBI.
Good place to run. So hopefully this works out. Where's that music? Okay. So when we come back, we'll pick that up, and then I want to go back in time to how did this all start again? Yeah. But you're bringing up a lot of very good points, and we're going to go into some greater depth as soon as this music comes on, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes once the music comes on. And where's my music? Where's the music? Come back, take it. Anyway,
it's running. We can't hear it. It's running. We just can't hear it. I'm going to go ahead and remove it.
Can't hear it.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
You need some more speed records in this day and age. You need coverage.
Coverage? Oh, you mean them little root weevils that crawl around popping off cameras in your face?
Those root weevils write history.
Many of you know that quote by Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men, "You can't handle the truth." Well, you can, and Event Horizons will give you those truths. So when you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore from that memorable CNN network, you'll know just what to do. We will draw you in and become your news addiction at Event Horizons. Join us Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time at freedomslips.com. Revolution Radio. Our world team members are Dennis Fetcho, John Ilias, David Dunger, Hyla Cass, MD, Melanie Bridgeton, Jim Mars, Paula Harris, John Trallo, Maria Payan, Christopher Husser, DODDS, Jonathan Orchard, and me, your anchor, Dr. Robin Falco.
If you decide not to volunteer, it will not be held against you in any way.
Sounds dangerous. It is. Very dangerous. Count me in.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
In breaking news, a visiting Syrian diplomat reported today that their population is evolving rapidly and advancing into a fifth-dimensional consciousness. They are seeking peace with all cosmic cultures, which may mean that the Earth will be asked to join the prestigious Galactic Federation of Light Alliances. Please join Debbie West and Michael Hathaway on Lost Knowledge, Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Studio A, for the latest breaking news on the Star Visitor's peaceful contact and the ongoing project of cleansing the Earth.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio!
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
February is Heart Month. Every year for the month of February, to show our appreciation to Extendivite's faithful customers, we have a sale. If you would like to try Extendivite, now is the time to get a few months ahead and really give Extendivite the time to show you how it works. Most of Extendivite's long-term customers wait for this sale to stock up. People and doctors tell us about the unbelievable improvements that they have experienced in their overall health, not just the heart. Extendivite wants you to experience the power of these herbs. Get a 4-month supply for only $115 for either the capsules or tincture. Please take advantage of this once-per-year sale and get healthy for life. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or find us on Amazon.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome back to Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio. And I'm Janet Carolison with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lesson, and our producer, Thomas Becker. And we are involved in a very fascinating conversation with Kenneth Hopkins, who is a abductee, contactee, experiencer, whatever you want to call it. He feels like it's more like abductions, and he has been documenting these things in security cameras, hidden in people's houses. He's got a lot of pictures, and he's also had personal experiences. So where do we want to go? I know we were in the middle of a story, and then you guys started talking about something when I was taking a little break.
We're going to go asking people to support our radio station. Janet's going to tell you how to...
Why don't you do that one, honey? Tell everybody how to support the radio station.
There's this thing, a email address where you can donate money, and so put some money in and keep the show going. What's it called, Janet?
Yeah. It's a donation button. It's on revolution.radio. So go up and click it right now. And then we always ask Thomas, where are we in the fundraising? How are we doing?
We need $243, and we should be able to make that up in this show. So get off that currency and mail it in.
Good.
Okay. So listen. Well, during the break, what happened during the break is we were talking about what the amazing thing that the camera revealed about what the process of teleporting or somehow reaching the singularities that touch all the other singularities and transport you or half of you. And it was just utterly fascinating. Could you give us how this worked and what you found out?
Well, we had more questions from our videos than we could answer because everything definitely defied laws of physics and definitely showed a very advanced technology. So all we can say is the person became two, and then that other person disappeared, or the whole person would disappear. The other thing I had left out is, and oftentimes in these cases, visitors come into the room to accompany the person being teleported. And we got one picture of, and I call them interdimensionals. Two of them, they're again heavy and static because of the electromagnetic frequency. But we had a child describe it as the friends come and take me to my dreams. So we were working to photograph these individuals that will appear in a room, and then often they'll also return with a person in a room. And one of my earliest experiences, which was traumatic in putting together the whole abduction ET scenario, was a visitation that occurred. And I was at the process of putting the pieces together from hypnosis. And I woke up to what felt like pinpricks in my feet. And then I found myself paralyzed. And then I watched what looked like a young man come through the bedroom door. And he had this light that came from his waist and went to the ceiling, and it was triangular cone-like. It looked like, and it was attached to his, like it was attached to his belt. It looked like solid light. It looked like the light was a solid object. And then I lost consciousness. Of course, the thing you try to do is you try to make sense out of everything. You try to make it work in your logic. So I was assuming, okay, the person coming in the room with a triangular light is my son with a flashlight. And then I realized that wasn't my son. That wasn't a flashlight. He was speaking a language I wasn't familiar with. And so I assumed he was talking to a person that was where I couldn't move because I was paralyzed. I couldn't move my eyes. I could move my pupils, but I couldn't move my head. So all I can do is move my pupils to see what was in the room. So I assumed he was talking to another person at the head of the bed. Then I became unconscious. And then my next memory, I was conscious, and a woman was standing by the side of the bed, and she's putting the blankets over me. And I can hear her telepathically speaking about her concern for me. And then she left. And that whole experience was very traumatic for me, just knowing that there's no security in my house. And so I assumed that this wasn't the first time this had been occurring, that this had been occurring other times. And also, there's a process that plays a major role in all of this for us, is a dissociation process, where we dissociate or another self takes over, and in the hypnosis we came across another personality that played a major role in the abductions.
And who was that?
We named him Kenneth, and we couldn't get a clear understanding of what or who he was, because he was able to talk telepathically to people in the room. And he spoke very clearly to the psychics. He spoke in the head very clearly. And during the period of time I was working with psychic development groups, he'd often speak to the people that were assisting and healing. And so whether he was a personality, or whether he was another soul, all of this was left very unclear to us. But we believe that he was the one that was mesmerizing the girls, or taking the girls to the ships. So he would take over me and mesmerize them and bring them to the ships. And he seemed to have other abilities using. So during my blackouts, he seemed to be playing a very conscious role.
Wow.
And he seemed to be working for the Greys very purposely.
So earlier, you...
What did he and the Greys that were running him want?
Well, they wanted the girls to put the embryos in them. So when they were nearby, he would become, I don't know if it was at the site of the ship. I never had any sightings of the ships. The only thing that I came closest to was I was parked on a dirt road, and all these lights were flashing, and I thought they were a cruiser, and then I lost consciousness after that. So I don't know if what triggered him was the ships. I don't know exactly what triggered him, but his purpose was to get the girls to the ships.
Wow.
And he was successful.
What?
He was quite successful.
Yeah, he was. I couldn't. I couldn't understand how he mesmerized the girls. He put him in a trance state, and then lead them by their hand to the ship. And I believe that's what the Defense Department saw, was him leading that girl to the ship that was above the trees in the woods. And so I believe that's what brought on a lot of the surveillance. whatever those two agents witnessed around that abduction.
Makes sense, yeah.
So back to the Defense Department. So you ran into their arms when you were. Go back to that where how
to the Navy.
You ran away from the frying pan into from the frying pan into the fire. We were starting to go down that thread.
Into the Navy. You went to the Navy.
Yeah. Well, after I ran into the Navy to get away from what I thought was dangerous people that were looking to hurt me. And then when the vehicles started showing up, it didn't make any sense to me. It's like, I'm 1,500 miles away. What is this about? There was a drug connection that made even less sense, which I couldn't figure out. Because the man that disappeared had given me information, and he said if anything happened to him to turn it over to the DEA. But the man that had disappeared had information on me when I met with him that I don't know how he had. So so basically I ran into the Navy because I felt that was the safest place. And then, of course, everything continued. And basically, it continued basically until so it made me suspicious of what the blackouts were about. I felt that whatever the surveillance was about, it was connected to the blackouts.
Yeah.
And so that made me in 2000. People were being seen in this house while it was under construction that weren't supposed to be here. Locks had been disassembled, so they looked like they were locked. The neighbor had complained about people being so. The impression I had, and this would have been 2005. Was that they had put devices in the house during its construction. I wish I'd kept that device because I was going to try to work through an attorney because the phone stuff that was going on, I brought started to bring action with FCC against Verizon because basically the phones would shut off with certain people, disconnects, the phones wouldn't work. Basically, I was having phone service that wasn't working, so I was going to go after Verizon for failure to provide services. And then the FCC started the process, and then the FCC basically said there was nothing they can do. There was a federally approved tap. Earlier...
Wow.
Earlier they had about 2 or 3 years earlier, one of the technicians on the phone said, "Your line is open. Is somebody else on the other line?" And I said, "No, there's no. I'm the only one on the line." That says, "Your line is open. Your line is showing that there's somebody accessing your line." So they sent a technician down to try to locate where the line may have been being accessed from. And so they checked all the main connection points. They couldn't find an access point to the line. And so nothing further was done on that. But one of the common things the FCC said that you can tell you have a wiretap is your phone rings with your caller ID number.
Mm.
So if you're getting a call and it's to your phone number, or if it's from your phone number, that's evidence of a tap.
Oh, I just got that the other day, so I've been tapped.
Yeah, well, when I stopped,
I went, what's going on? My phone's calling myself. And I go,
when I stopped the hypnosis, the surveillance stopped, which I thought was really interesting. So that was about 2 years ago.
So you don't think you're being
there doesn't
watched
seem to
right
be
now?
any. There doesn't seem to be any evidence of it, but it definitely seemed that. I mean, I was being followed to the hypnosis sessions, followed back from the hypnosis sessions. There was a strange car hanging around the hypnosis sessions. I became suspicious of the hypnotist, that she was possibly. They were trying to give me an excuse why there was a car parked across the street every time we had a session. There was things that made me suspicious of her. But when we stopped the wiretap, when we stopped the regressions, maybe it was just coincidental, the hypnosis stopped.
Yeah,
I mean, when we stopped the hypnosis, the surveillance, the vehicles.
Wait, one at a time. Go ahead.
Imagine, if you would, Ken, imagine that they want you to be talking to the public. What would their motive be if they just, why? And could that be what's happening? That you're being.
That seems to be because where I had conversations before, the phone was being disconnected in those conversations. When I was doing another radio show, the host was disconnected from the show.
Wow.
And then when we were getting ready to get question and answers and the switchboard was lighting up, suddenly everything was wiped out. So there definitely has been evidence where they didn't want me disclosing. When I was trying to work on my second book and also with my first book, as I was writing on the computer, it was being deleted. But all that stuff seems to have stopped.
Yes. So these guys aren't accidental. What if you were going to ascribe their motive, or you figure out what they're up to? What's it look like?
Yeah, I was just thinking of all where in the conversations there'd be disconnects on certain subjects. But all of that, my computer is still messed up. I can't figure out what's going on. When I was emailing to
Janet.
Janet, it was saying that they weren't going through. And so that's why I kept asking you if you received it, because it was acting like it didn't get sent. And then the other thing that's interesting is my email keeps coming up as if it's out of East Hampton.
Oh.
So I had trouble with setting up emails. I had to give up for a year because I couldn't. They would download thousands of my old emails, would just continuously download. And so then Verizon would shut the server down. And then I'd be without an email address. So I would spend weeks and hours back and forth trying to get my Verizon email account to work. And then we changed passwords. Shortly after we changed the passwords, they'd just continuously download all the old emails. And when they were done with the 2000, they'd start right back to the first one, and it would go 24 hours. So Verizon couldn't keep that email open anymore. So it took me a long time before I could have a working email account.
So they know that now you're blasting to everybody. You're telling everybody in the world, hey, this is how it was. These guys did all these crappy things to me, and I'm not keeping quiet about it. I'm telling the truth about what happened to me, and they're letting you do it. That means that they're not hassling you anymore. They went to so much trouble before, and now they're letting you out. You're part of whatever their plan is. And what the heck is that? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, whether this is part of the what do they call it, disclosure, whether they're not censoring people anymore. it's hard to tell, but I got a lot of computer stuff with the pictures. But what to me seems so great about the photographing is it gave definite proof.
Yeah.
And so that I can say I left my room last night. It shows it in the videos. So it substantiates what people are experiencing in their nights. I got a picture of two visitors. Like I said, they're blurred. I was hoping to get more of the people coming in the room, because I have seen people, when I've been returned, I've seen people in the room, and then they disappear shortly afterwards. So the evidence is measurable. We were hitting EMF levels that were incredible. We couldn't understand. We had this one house, we were getting close to 200 on the number, on the Tesla score, on the Tesla. And we couldn't find a source. We couldn't find a direction. It was just all-encompassing. And in that house, we were trying. This woman felt that something was trying to communicate through her Apple iPod, so she wanted to see. We wanted to see what it was that was. It was literally talking. Her iPad would come out with these sounds that at first I thought they were electrical sounds, electrical static, but then it became obvious that they weren't electrical. There was too much of a pattern to them. So we decided to set up her iPod, and let it film in the room. And then we were getting images that were projecting in the room. And then the iPad picked it up, and then we just took the picture from the iPod, and I sent you some of those pictures. Unfortunately, the best ones we lost. But what was interesting with these pictures is the day it was raining out, the images were blurred. They weren't crisp and clear. And the days that it wasn't raining out, or the day that it was clear, the images were crystal clear. So that showed us that the images were coming through third dimension, not fourth dimension, and that the weather and the humidity was affecting their projection. So what we got for communication was just these visual pictures of lines and colors, and as we and I sent some of those pictures. One is of a lightning, but the best pictures were taken. We had I had some really good pictures of some solid images that they had formed in the room, and I believe these images were formed with plasma. Or I can't think of what else would have put a projection like that in the room. But it was obvious that we couldn't. They spoke an entirely different language that we couldn't translate. It was coming through the iPad, and then they sent images that were very mathematical in crisscrossing of lines, and they came out three-dimensional. So the electrical system in that house, they had some major shortages in the end in the house, and also the computer was blown out during those communications. Now, in some of these experiences, or these night experiences, a lot of them I don't have full consciousness in. I could have anything from incredibly clear consciousness to incredibly vague consciousness in these experiences. Some of them are so clear, I'm trying to figure out where the hell I am, how am I going to get back home? and others they're not as vivid. And so in the hypnosis, we were getting the parts that weren't vivid. And there was a lot.
I have that too. Like, how are you going to get home? I have a lot of those. Like, it's lucid. You become aware that you're somewhere else.
Yeah.
And you're trying to figure out how do you get home. But before I can really fret about it too much, my body has to pee, so they let me go home. I'm just here.
Yeah, well, that's been an interesting. I with my blood pressure medication, have to go to the bathroom a lot. So in these experiences, I'm having to go to the bathroom, and then oftentimes they'll take me to a facility. They'll show me where a bathroom is, but there seems, and my other friend who has these experiences, she seems to feel that we can bring ourselves back. We don't have total control, but where the room remains showing the disruption while we're gone. So what I think is happening is I'm returning so I can go to my bathroom in my house. Because I'm more comfortable with the bathroom in my house. And some of these experiences, like, where the hell is the bathroom? Some of them, they have the bathrooms out in the open. There's no privacy. And, of course, you don't want to use a toilet where everybody can see what you're doing. So the other thing that was happening was... during these, if we do something wrong, or if we do something we're not supposed to do, we're immediately sent back.
Right.
Like
and also, you can come back, go to the bathroom, and go right back to the process. You can go right back to where you were.
That's what happens, yeah. You go to the bathroom, then you go back to bed, and then you're right where you were.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes...
But I have a lot of very positive... For me, it's very exciting and very positive. I come back with this elated, super highly charged, rejuvenated. I feel a lot of love in my heart. I don't know what your emotional reaction is to your experiences, but mine are... They're ecstatic. I look forward to them. It's like, I'm excited.
Yeah, I have to say, in the end, I enjoy them. But often, the confusion has frightened me. I'm waking up in another bed, and there's people I haven't seen before, or I'll end up in an argument because I and the other person aren't understanding. But a lot of the places I've been teleported to seem like the people are expecting me. They'll tell me, we're expecting you, Ken. So there seems to be people on the other side that have more knowledge about what's going on. And one of them, often I end up teleport. I don't wear clothes at night because I'm not comfortable wearing clothing. And often I've been teleported without clothing, and I find it very embarrassing. And they'll give me clothes, they'll get me dressed, and then in other instances I have clothes on. I don't know where they came from, but I have clothing on, and but in the ones that I didn't have clothing on. But there seems to be where we go. And I've been with this military group several times, quite a few times. And so there seems to be people in our world that know about this. That you know, so I definitely believe there's people that know this technology, familiar with this technology, like that family in Illinois. When I went to call them back again, the guy denied calling me, and I wanted to communicate to find out more about how I had visited his home several times. And I didn't want to talk to him at that time because he was dealing with the death of his father. But when I called back 3 or 4 weeks later, he denied ever making the call. So it seems
so
like
irritating when they do that, because it's like you have all this. I mean, they're just very incredible pieces of information. It's very personal, intimate. You share, you debrief, yeah.
I believe he was debriefed. I believe the father was aware of the project, and the son was debriefed not to talk about it.
I think they get mind wiped. It's not even they just don't know it anymore.
Yeah, if they
not always, but some could be hushed, but others are like.
Yeah, I think he was confronted by somebody and told not to further discuss it. And I think his father was part of this project, this teleportation project. The father had to have awareness that I was being teleported. But of course, I'll never have any clear answers on that. Now you had asked a very question about what ETs I've met.
Yes.
Many of the ETs are, or some aren't ETs. Some are other humans. I'm pretty convinced. The ETs usually have. They're not usually that verbal. At least the ones that look like us. They don't seem to have much verbal exchange. It's either feelings you get, emotions you get, not much discussion. But the humans, there's more discussion with, there's more verbalization with. And then some of the places I was teleported to seemed like they were other planets. One I was sent, I ended up in what looked like a giant glass dome on what looked like a fairly barren planet. And people had plants in pots that they were putting these rods in. So I assumed the rod was like a thin metal rod. I assumed the rod worked to fertilize the plant. And that was just a very short experience. Another place I ended up in, I could not understand why I couldn't stand up. I couldn't get out of the chair. And it took incredible force to bend and straighten my knees. And then I realized I was on a place that had a high gravitational field. The ET that was there with me was very short and stout. And she was she was about 3.5 feet, 3 to 3.5 feet, and she was very round and solid. Like she would have been someone that would have been able to handle a high gravitational planet. In some of the ships I visited, there were communities on these ships, and they had normal gravity in these ships. You can walk on these ships. There was no, they just seemed like they had normal gravity. The group that I initially met on the ships eventually seemed like it settled on Earth, because one of the communities I visited was a gated community, and I think it was what I got. I think it may have, I don't know if it was in the Alps, but it was definitely in a high altitude. It had high 8-10-foot fences with barbed wire going across the top and a front entrance. And I was sent in, I was told to go in and find a date. I don't know what they were why two men sent me in to go and find a date, was what they said. So I walked into this village. One of the buildings on my left had hotel written on it, and it had all these bunk beds in it. And you can see people's belongings that were attached to probably their bunk bed. Another building I went by said store on it, and it looked like a community that was mocking our way of living. As I walked, people were carrying bags. People were somewhat non-responsive, and I bumped into this one woman that had a very dark tan. And I apologized for bumping into her, and then I wandered around some more. And then eventually I came back to her again, and then she told me she had just come in. She had just come into the village. She was the only one that had real dark skin. Everybody else was light-skinned. So she brought me to a barn that had animals in it, and she told me that she took care of the animals. So that looked like a E.T. community being settled on Earth.
So you were suspicious because they were labeling things store.
Yeah,
it's like
they had a giant. Yeah, they had a giant hotel on this building that had a whole mess of bunks in it, and then store, and it was laid out like a street, and it had guards on the entrance, guards with guns. And another one. I end up seeing this woman 6 times. I end up having 6 trips to visit her. And the first visit, we must have been in some kind of transport device. I could not figure it out. We were in these beds that were up against the ceiling, and it was like it may have been packed several layers high. And she looked pretty human, except she looked like she was dressed in clothing from World War II or the 1950s. And she was on one side of me, and then I don't know if they were her brothers or her friends were on the other side of me, and she was handing them toothbrushes. But they were always, whenever I visited her, they were always with her. One was very protective of her, and he didn't want me near her. And the other one was kind of keeping him from interfering with us being together. The second time I ran into her, she wanted to wrestle, so she was wrestling me on the ground. And I was trying to, where I was seeing, and usually I don't see the same person 6 times. Eventually, her brothers kept, I think I call them her brothers, they kept very close eye on her, and she wanted to get away from them. So we got into this building, and we locked the door, and then she undressed. And so she was looking, and there was a lot of sexual activity with these beings. There's either classes, and we tried to get information on what the classes were about, and we got a little information, but for some reason we couldn't get the information the classes were about. And it was interesting how the hypnosis wouldn't bring up certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And
I wanted to ask about the sexual activity, and then we'll go back to the hypnosis. Now, they seem to stimulate some people to want to have sex with each other. Do you feel like you were artificially stimulated to want to engage sexually, or naturally stimulated?
One used a gas. She used something that she sprayed in my face. and I got confirmation on it from I don't know if you remember the woman in, I forget her name, in the Anderson affair, one of the earliest abductions.
Betty Andreasen, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, she had written, she was in my email group, and she had written back that they were trying to discourage the use of this gas. But the gas basically caused the over-sexual stimulation to the point where I ripped the woman's clothes off, and the one that sprayed me. And then I lost, I didn't have any memory after that. I was very angry, but I felt like I'd had the experience of that gas before, where the sexual energy was incredibly high. But in most of these, with these women, and this has been going on for over like 30 years, or 20, 30 years, they had, in other experiences, they would introduce me to babies. Now, I don't have full consciousness, so I don't know it. So it would seem to me that they were introducing me to babies that I may have been a father of. But these ones lived in regular houses. So that, and same furnishings as a house, a couch, chairs. In one case, they were introducing me to the child, and I don't know if the child, and then we all went for a walk in the woods, and the child was asking me questions, and I was kind of overwhelmed, and I did not know how to, so I was kind of laughing and making jokes of the child's questions, so that visit didn't go very well. I felt really bad afterwards. In another one, the woman was expecting me, and she had her child in her arms, a young female child, and she was about 3 or 4, and she wanted me to take the pictures with her. She had gotten pictures of her and her baby, and she wanted me to bring these pictures back. And I had been teleported in my pajamas. So I was there in my pajamas, and I wish I had taken the pictures from her and put them in the pajamas, because they might have come back. In another situation, I actually ended up with the object they had me pick off of a table, but I could not make, and it ended up in my coat. I don't know how it got in my coat, and I couldn't figure out the material it was made out of. And they looked like little robots on a string. It was like a little bracelet. And they had us inject ourselves in that one. We arrived, the room was incredibly cold, and then the room warmed up. They had us, they handed us needles, and they had us inject the needles into our leg. And then after we injected the needles in our leg, then they had us go into this other room, and the first thing I think is, something to eat. And they had this table of what looked like these cheap plastic bracelets. And we were told to take a bracelet. So we took a bracelet and put it in the pocket of whatever we had on, and then went in a van ride to another location, and there was this woman that was 3 feet tall. She was about 3 feet tall, but she was the perfect dimensions of a human, except she was 3 feet tall. She had, good figure. She was all proportioned, just like we were, and she was very scared. And so she had pulled me away from the group I was. She wanted me to stay with her. And then they did a presentation, and then that's all I remember. I don't remember anything. Then I woke up after the presentation. But in a lot of these things, I don't remember. And it's like we're purposely set to not remember. what they're teaching us or telling us. And when we try to get it under hypnosis, we can't get much of anything under the hypnosis. And then there's...
Well, you have an incredible amount of detail, what you're conveying to us. So that's a lot more than most people have. And I suspect that you can eventually recover everything.
Yeah, I tried. We got one class, and they were basically trying to get people to express, be free in expression. They seem to be trying to get them to open their minds. I don't know if some came from very strict societies and cultures where they couldn't think about things, but they're trying to get people to think more expansively. And so they were initiating, I forget what the particular thoughts were, but, just to get people to express themselves more openly with less fear of expression. And that seemed to be the purpose of what that class was. Another class...
I want to make sure, because right near the end, tell us about your books, how people can get them, and what your website is, and let us help you.
All right.
Well, yeah, we have 5 more minutes, but I want to. Sasha, do you have a question or comment to ask? Go ahead. You want to say something else? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say my book is Earth Transformations.
And I couldn't find it to put a link up. Can you send that to me?
Okay, yeah, I can say it's Earth Transformations. It's published by a Lulu publishing company, or I'll send it to you. And then just my name, and it's kind of a splish splash of, it gets into the personalities, it gets into the ETs that I saw many times over. It gets into the episodes of 1975, 76, and 77. It's taken from my diary, and I put it together in a kind of a fiction, non-fiction setup. I recorded, my diaries were very good in detail, and they helped me recover a lot. And so I wrote that part. It was called UFO Girl. Which had to do with the agent, with the implant, and what happened with her and me. I'll send Earth Transformations, and I haven't set up a site. I was doing a lot of writing on Facebook. But I'm open to talk to people, or I was answering a lot of questions for other experiencers.
I don't remember how I found you. I might have found you on Facebook, but I think you have an incredible story. We could probably do more. We'll have you back sometime. So we have 3 more minutes. What would you like to tell our listeners about your experiences?
Well, main thing is these experiences are isolating for people. And that's why the information on the formation that deals with the Greys and the government are particularly important. And they cover every realm I can think of. And they violate every rule of science that we were raised on. And I think the phenomena aspect causes dissociation as well as some of the traumatic aspects. Finding the right people to talk to and share with is going to be very constructive for people having the experiences. And of course, talking to people who haven't had the experiences is going to just lead to ridicule.
Right, they don't understand, and so we feel ostracized. But it's getting better. We are getting better.
It seems like people have become more accepting. when I was first starting out, I was being told that, your experiences don't sound like my friends. I don't believe you're an abductee. I was being told all sorts of things by some of the professionals, and then some of the writers, and then some of the other writers were, there was this thing, if a person wants to become famous, so they're going to pretend to be an abductee. And it's like, the only reason we're sharing what we're having is so others could understand better what they're experiencing. Most of my life, I had no recollection of what was going on. I had scuffs on my shoes and wristwatches that didn't work. But other than that, I had no suspicion of anything.
So, yeah, it's very important to find us a place to share. And I think that's the end of our show. We'll have you back again. Thank you so much, Kenneth.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Much love and blessings, and aloha.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free, but there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver Eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Take a look around, kid. What do you see? Homes being foreclosed. People working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table and still drowning in debt. Don't get me wrong. This country was founded on great ideals and principles. They've all been ruined by the banks. Open your eyes to the banks that are robbing you. You know who my favorite president was? Who? Thomas Jefferson. Because he saw all of this coming and tried to stop it. He fought the banks. JFK too, and they killed him for it. The banking institution is more dangerous than an army, he said. He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This